Thank you. Now I'm happy to take any questions.
Hi, Governor. Public health officials on the front line of this pandemic say despite the deficit, it's imperative to invest millions more in ongoing public health funding for counties across California. They're asking specifically for $150 million ongoing annual money, and it looks like your budget has a small fraction of that, about $4.8 million. So there's big concern that without a greater investment, the state will be ill-prepared not only in the coming months, but for the next disaster, the next crisis that the state can't anticipate. So are you open to that conversation? What do you say to those concerns?
Federal government support the HEROES Act. Nancy Pelosi has put out a pathway, a strategy to help support with $500 billion states, to help support with close to $500 billion cities and counties that substantially answer that question very specifically. State of California, as large as we are, nation's 5th largest economy, when we came into this, $3.1 trillion output, simply cannot do all that is needed at this moment. We need the federal government. We need the federal support. And so working together, I'm confident we can get that support, and that will substantially address that concern.
One final question, Governor, for me. A few months ago, you were very excited about a historic investment in transforming the state's Medi-Cal program and investing a large amount of money in combating homelessness, expanding behavioral health, mental health care. And I see in your budget that looks like you're postponing the Cal-AIM initiative. Can you specifically explain is the state still pursuing the federal waivers that are critical to that effort? What is going forward and what's on the back burner for now?
Cal-AIM, and forgive folks are wondering, what are we talking about? It was a $695 million proposal. We worked on it for about a year. It was a centerpiece of my State of the State. This is one of the proposals in the January budget that we have to pull back. It's just the reality of the moment. That said, it's also one of the proposals that's triggered if there's support from the federal government to go forward. Again, foundational in terms of our efforts to address the needs to continue to move forward, to integrate physical and brain health in the state of California. We talked about it as a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Look, I just got here. It feels like years, but it's been less than a year and a half as your governor. Next few years, I hope to be back in a position where not only we get the federal support, we can jumpstart those efforts. So we're not going to walk away from them. Still enormous amount of work will be done on them, but without, unfortunately, the kind of resources that would have helped compel them further and faster. That said, that was a 1915B waiver. You asked a specific question. We will, yes, pursue our traditional 1335, 1115 waivers, forgive me, which one is relevant in that case, but we will continue to pursue waivers in the more traditional type under the whole person care construct. Again, that may mean something to a few folks. Most of you may be more confused by that, except to say we will continue to move forward to do justice to those base programs, protect those base programs, and protect those most vulnerable. I want to continue to reinforce we're not walking away from our commitments to reform our healthcare delivery system, to do more on prescription drugs, to draw down costs as a single purchaser, leveraging our purchasing power, continuing to do more to integrate behavioral health and brain health, and physical health. Even if we don't have the capacity under Cal-AIM, there's still a lot in that reform space that we're not walking away from.
Governor Jeremy White with Politico. Can you hear me through the mask? Great. Assembly budget leadership has suggested they may need to seek new revenue this year. A lot of local leaders, the mayor of San Francisco and others, are really looking to this split roll ballot proposition to help them stave off potentially the worst in cuts to local services. You've talked a lot about the additional revenue we're going to need from the federal government, particularly if that revenue doesn't materialize, and even if it does. Do you see potential areas for more revenue, including this split roll reform to Prop 13 that a lot of local leaders are asking for?
Yeah, look, there are many, many different proposals out there. That is perhaps the most important of all the proposals. And obviously, it's the proposal that marks consideration of everything else that is being advanced. So I'm very mindful of that, not surprisingly, but I'm also mindful of this moment to consider all the other proposals in and around that proposal that are coming to the fore, including in multiple proposals that came out of the Senate just a few days ago, other Assembly leaders that have ideas, and then economic recovery task forces, large and small, ours as well as local and regional task forces that have their own ideas in that space. We made it very clear. Take a look at the introductory letter in the May revise that I provided, that we are considering revenue acceleration strategies. We're considering other approaches, including other revenue strategies. But all of that has to be put in context, and all of that has to be considered against proposals that are currently on the table. So the answer is yes. We will pursue conversations with the legislature leaders all up and down the state, and we hope we can help guide some consensus about what is most appropriate to put forward to the voters this November.
Hi, Laurel Rosenhall with Cal Matters. There's been a lot of different categories of cuts and categories of funding, and so could you just please detail what are some of the highlights of the things that are in the category that could be reversed through the federal action you're talking about? And then how would you respond to criticism that that's basically playing politics with those people who would benefit from those services by making them subject to these, this leveraging the federal government?
I'd rather give people the hope that we care enough about these programs that we're not going to cut them without considering ways of obviating the need to cut them. I don't know if that's anything but principled. And the extent that we've done that for 26% of the budget solutions, we have, but not every single thing is in that category. CalAIM is one of them. They're in the category. A lot of work that we want to do on criminal justice reforms, and there are a series of things, and you're going to have the opportunity to go through every single line item in detail in a moment when Keeley comes up with her presentation. But I think under the circumstances, it's appropriate, considering the magnitude of this shortfall, and having trigger language that, again, is written into the Budget Act, I hope gives people some optimism and hope. Same time, it's a balanced budget. Constitutionally, it has to be a balanced budget.
Governor, this is Adam Beam with the Associated Press. Your Medi-Cal budget includes eliminating a proposal that would expand coverage to people 65 and older living in the country illegally. It would also eliminate expansion of some disabled residents, but between 123 and 138% of poverty. I was just curious how you justify these cuts in the middle of a pandemic, including, given that these are some vulnerable populations.
Well, they're not cuts. That was an enhancement in my January budget that we proposed. And unfortunately, we don't have the resources to expand that program in particular. So in that respect, that's just one of the many things that we wanted to do, that I announced, at least my support and intention in January, that unfortunately we're not in a position at this time to advance. The core programs in the Medi-Cal programs, those expansions that were well underway, the work we did to put back the core construct of the Affordable Care Act, the work we did during this pandemic with credible leadership of Peter Lee to expand the number of people that have enrolled on to Covered California, that foundationally will continue, and we're proud of that, and we believe that is absolutely justifiable.
Governor John Myers from Los Angeles Times. A couple of things really quickly I want to clarify on the school funding. It's a pretty substantial, quite substantial cut in Prop 98 funding from what you envisioned in January, and it looks like you are not funding schools in the 2021 budget year, the one that you're rolling out, at a level that even they thought would maintain current services. And some of the early reaction is that cuts of these magnitudes simply won't let schools reopen under the conditions that exist. What do you say to that fear?
Well, I say there's been a pandemic that has precipitated in a 22.3% reduction in revenue in just over 100 days, completely unanticipated. I say to them that none of us expected this moment. As you know, John, I announced, and I believe it was here in January, a record investment in public education. That was the budget I put forward. You are correct. The Budget Act last year was $81.1 billion. The current projected investment in that budget is $70.5 billion. That represents about a 13% decline from what was approved in the Budget Act. So no one's been hiding that. It's a very challenging moment, and that's why I want folks to know that we're using CARE Act dollars that gives the state discretion and putting $4.4 billion into our education system to answer the concern that you highlighted specifically, to provide flexibility and to provide funding that directly can address learning loss and provide the kind of flexibility through the summer and fall that can meet the needs of the system as we work together to address the need to get the federal government to continue to do more for education, not just here in the state, but across the country.
Quickly, could I ask you, just in terms of your revenue projections, what is your team telling you about how much worse this could be? There's a lot of discussion. You know, the LAO has talked about a U-shaped curve or an L-shaped curve. There's a lot of discussion it could be worse than maybe what you're assuming. What's the outlier? I mean, is there the potential for significantly bigger pain? I know the answer to that is yes, but what can you tell us about what they've been telling you?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is, yes. We're very sober about all this. By the way, I should just note, as of today, 19 counties have self-attested. The attestations are up, and those counties, 19 now, are moving deeper into the second phase and reopening large sectors of their economy. I'll remind people that 70% plus the economy, many parts of the state now are reopened, manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, in very large number of places now back operational, again, conditioned on modifications. No one's naive about that. So we're doing what we can to move forward.
Having some technical difficulties there at the end of Governor Gavin Newsom's news conference. Right now, he's taking questions from reporters. Again, he has thrown out a lot of numbers today, but what he did say is that there is a projected deficit for the state's current fiscal and budget year of $54.3 billion. And he laid out a plan to try and pay that down. Some of that includes 3 reserve accounts that equals to $8.8 billion. Also, the CARES Act that would equal to 15% of the deficit. But what he did call on was the federal government to help, specifically President Trump, to pass the new HEROES Act. We want to listen in more to this news conference. Here's the governor.
Customers aren't wanting to spend again, and that's why this is a very stubborn reality that we are living through. And that's why we have to be always mindful of health and the economy, not health or the economy, health and the economy. The sooner we can make people feel healthier, the sooner our economy will start opening up at full throttle, not just modest phase. And so that's my hope and expectation, that we could continue to tame this spread, suppress the spread. I should note that we saw a 2.2% reduction yesterday in ICUs. We saw, unfortunately, a 1.2% increase, modest increase in hospitalizations. Forgive me, those two numbers are flipped, but you get the sense, again, we're within that margin, sort of bouncing around, stable, but still not where we need to be. Over 2,000 additional people tested positive yesterday as well. So again, all of these things got to address this issue of COVID-19, continue to work hard on that as we work to reopen this economy and address the budget anxiety that clearly is manifest in the presentation today.
Hi, Governor. Nicole Nixon with CAP Radio. Some Republican senators have indicated that the HEROES Act is essentially a non-starter given the price tag. So should Speaker Pelosi propose or negotiate a smaller relief package, isn't it better for states to get less than what's proposed than nothing at all?
You're talking about Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and I can assure you she does nothing without consideration of how to actually get something done. She's one of those leaders that doesn't just get it, she delivers. And so she knows what she's doing. She's not naive to those calls and the consternation that you've expressed across the aisle around concerns and deficits and costs, but she is also, I thought, very forthright and honest when she says the costs of not doing something will bear out in longer economic pain, longer-term recession, and suffering. And the biggest mistake we can make is not taking seriously this moment and magnify the opportunity to mitigate this moment by diminishing the time to getting back on our feet, by focusing on the needs of getting our cities and our states going again. What is the national economy if nothing more than the sum total of state and local economies? A federal vision is not realized in Washington, D.C. A federal vision is realized at the local level. And so at the end of the day, if we're serious about economic growth and getting this nation open again, then we must be serious about getting states and cities off the mat and back up so that we are moving again. And that's why I have confidence in Speaker Pelosi, and I'm not naive that where she starts is exactly where she'll end.
Hi, Governor. Sophia Bolag here from the Sacramento Bee. On the topic of the increased costs in this May revision related to COVID-19, you said last week that you were going to direct your state agencies to expedite releasing the contracts that outline those costs. But my colleagues and I still have not gotten many of the ones we've requested. We've been directed to go through Public Records Act requests, which are taking weeks.
Well, let's fix that. I'm going to fix that, and I'm going to make that crystal clear publicly and to them. We got to get those released. So that's going to get fixed.
Will you commit to posting them on like the state's contracting website or to other state websites?
I'll defer to what's appropriate in that space. But as it relates to being able to access that information, you certainly have that right, and look forward to getting that information out as soon as possible. And candidly, curious which ones haven't been yet, and we'll make sure we get those done.
Governor, Katie Orr, KQED News. Two questions for you. One, a process question. Are you anticipating having another budget process in August after we actually get our tax revenues in from the July 15th tax deadline? And also on environmental protection, can you comment on that? You've had to make some cuts in that area, and it comes at a time when federal support is basically absent for those, and a lot of people are looking to California as a leader in that area.
Yeah, we're going to try to do as much as we humanly possibly can, do as much to continue to preserve those core programs under our cap and trade program, $925 million, I believe, or $65 million, $965 in the budget. You saw our categorization of prioritization in that respect: safe, clean drinking water, air quality in disadvantaged communities, and efforts on forest management, wildfire management as being those core frame of focus. So it goes deep into that zeitgeist of the frame of California, doing more in this space and continue to protect and preserve our gains in this space as we continue to litigate and win overwhelmingly in the court of law, including a big victory last week. And so, look, we can do as much as we can. Like to be able to do more, but foundationally, I think we've done justice in this budget in terms of protecting those core regulatory constructs as we can. And that said, look forward to the give and take with the legislature and any augmentation perhaps that's needed or any blind spots that our administration put out. And let's try to fix those as quickly as we can.
Hi, Governor. Alexi Koseff from the San Francisco Chronicle. Your budget proposal mentions trying to save money by closing 2 state prisons over the next 2 years. Has your staff identified which sites those would be, and are you expecting a permanent reduction to prison population levels because of something that's occurred during this pandemic?
I don't know if there's anything specific outside of this pandemic specific in terms of the permanent reduction. We'll see. It's a fluid and dynamic as it relates to intake and number of people in and out of the system. Look, as it relates to the prisons, I made a commitment when I ran for office. I made a commitment last year. I made a commitment again in the January budget that it's my intention to shut down state prison, to continue to invest more and more in education. It's a core value, back to that value statement and the value slide that we advanced. We're not walking away from that in this budget. We haven't made the determination of the specific sites, and respectfully, if we had, I caution those that want to highlight that. It becomes very difficult if you do make that determination and make it public to recruit and retain personnel at that site. It could create all kinds of problems, and so I caution people, to even those that speculate at what those sites may be, to consider that. It's not your responsibility to do that, but it is my responsibility to govern and manage and try to do so as effectively and efficiently as possible. And so we don't identify the specifics, and truly and candidly, we're negotiating that, and so we have not made any of those determinations. One thing I have, though, made is determination, not just to shut down those prisons, but I also have committed to working with our prison guards unions and others on the reforms that we laid out in January. And I want folks to know we're not walking away from those reforms, specifically as it relates to reimagining one of our state prisons and making it a world-class, second-to-none example of rehabilitation at scale. There was a specific proposal I laid out in the January budget. We are committing ourselves, and I'm hopeful we'll have concurrence with the legislature to advance that proposal. I think it's incumbent upon us to do more and better in the rehabilitative space. And we've had a wonderful collaboration with the leadership of the union that's willing to work with us. We still have a lot of issues in this space, and I don't want that momentum to go away. And so we want to commit to advancing that, and that's not going to be deviated from, at least in the context of the presentation and the proposals we're putting forth to the legislature. Look, I've spoken enough. I'm grateful for all the questions. I'm grateful for any of you that have stuck through this presentation. They're still with us. I, again, want to just express my deep appreciation to the people of the state of California, and also just express my deep respect for the struggles, for all that you are asked to do and are working through at this moment. It is my responsibility as the governor of the state of California to submit a balanced budget, but I do so soberly with a recognition not only of the impact of this budget on the lives of those that otherwise would be beneficiary of the budget, but an impact in terms of getting this economy moving again. One thing we did not highlight in this budget is our commitment to small business, our commitment to providing more loans and more resources to minority, women-owned businesses that otherwise fall through the cracks on SBA loans in the PPP program. We are committed in parallel to working with the legislature to fast-tracking bonds that have been approved but haven't been sold, to strategically align those bonds to transportation investments and work region to region, to work locally to amplify their efforts from an economic recovery perspective. I've got a wonderful task force that's coming out with advice and coming out with recommendations on a consistent basis. That will also be part of the conversation as we move this budget forward. And clearly it was part of the conversation that the Senate was having with their presentation. I know the Assembly is doing the same. And so it's a way of saying this. We want everybody to come together. We want everybody in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation to put their ideas on the table and know that we're not going to dismiss any idea out of hand. We want to be able to be considerate, thoughtful, and collaborative. That's my commitment to the legislature. That's my commitment to the people of the state of California. But I cannot make this point enough, and I'll end once again by reinforcing it. This pandemic is bigger than any one state. It's bigger than any nation. It's a global pandemic. That GDP number I showed you, we have never seen anything like that in our lifetime. The conditions that have presented themselves because of this health crisis have manifested in this economic crisis. The magnitude of what we are asked to do is very, very significant. And that's why the federal government is so important. Foundationally, that's the purpose of the federal government. Protect us, public safety, and protect the well-being of people. Individuals have seen their savings depleted. They've seen their credit rating torn apart. We're doing our best to help support people in need, but we now need the federal government to help support not only the state of California, but other states across this country. If they do, if they meet that moment, we will be able to significantly reduce the stress and the anxiety that many are feeling individually and those that have the benefit of supports from the state. and we are hopeful that that will be a successful endeavor, even one as challenging as the one the Speaker has put forward. This is a multi-year responsibility. We can't solve everything overnight without catastrophic cuts that are simply too much to bear. But we have put out a blueprint to balance a budget this year and to strategically move forward collaboratively to utilize our reserves, utilize our capacity to deliver a very thoughtful multi-year strategy to get this economy back on its feet and to help obviously get this budget back to the category where we left off as early as January. So with that, I will leave you with a more capable budget hand, and that is Keely Bosser, who runs our finance team, and I would be remiss if I did not just thank her and thank her incredibly talented team. There's nothing more challenging for people doing this kind of work than figuring out what is the best approach. None of them are enthusiastic about every decision that's being made because they recognize the people behind the numbers. But I think they've done a magnificent job, always with the eye of equity, the lens at protecting the most vulnerable, to put out a blueprint today. And again, their values speak loudly and clearly. And I just want you to know the value I have in Keely's leadership and our team's leadership. And I want to thank them for the incredible work they've done to date and all the hard work we have to go together before
Governor
July
Newsom
1st.
talking about the state budget and how the state plans to address the deficit of $54.3 billion for the current fiscal and budget year, offering up a plan including using reserve counts, the CARES Act as well, pulling back some of the proposed new programs from earlier this year, and also calling on the federal government to help mitigate budget cuts. Some of those budget cuts include the pay cuts to state employees, but the governor said that the federal government could help in that with the wave of a pen, of course, talking about signing the HEROES Act. The HEROES Act was unveiled by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. It's a $3 trillion coronavirus relief bill that has been unveiled. But Senate Republicans have criticized this and basically calling it dead on arrival, saying that many of the items in that bill are not related to coronavirus relief. But the governor hopes that this HEROES Act will be signed so that the state could get some relief, and says that the federal government has a moral, ethical, and financial responsibility to help the states. Of course, you can stay with KPIX 5 News and CBSN Bay Area. We are always on 24 hours a day.